We are sitting here tonight. She wouldn't like to be described this way, but I'm going to do it anyway. We're sitting here tonight in the presence of an honest to goodness theatrical legend.
Yeah.
This person was one of the co-founders of Theater for the New City in 1971. And it was dedicated, as we'll discuss, to a certain kind of repertory, a certain kind of theatrical experience. It's moved a few times. 1971, this is 2024. Crystal Field is still the executive director of this legendary off-Broadway company. That is some kind of theatrical record. She's still at the job full-time, giving opportunities to young people and further than young people, older than young people, looking for a chance in the theater. It's hard to make a break, to get into the theater. Crystal has always given the opportunities to people when somehow many other doors are closed. So let me start by asking you, way back 1971, you were the Judson Poets Theater. You and your colleagues from Judson Poets decided to leave Judson Poets and start Theater for the New City. What was your original intention for this theater?
Well, first of all, Judson was the mother and father of myriad poets and playwrights and actors, and it was really the proving ground and the birth of creativity in New York City. That was the Judson Poets Theater, started by Bob Nichols at the Judson Church. And so we all gravitated to that place because that was the birth of new work. We did a show called Dracula Sabbat. It had a cast of about 25.
Those were the days.
They were all naked halfway through the show. I have pictures, including me. Now, it's interesting because and we were reviewed by the New York Times. And the New York Times said about me that I was chubby and that eventually he knew I was going to get naked, and eventually I did. That was his whole review of me, anyway. However, it was a great success and a really interesting piece of work. And we had done many other pieces of theater at Judson, but this one had in it George Bartenieff, Larry Kornfeld directed it, and Theo Barnes and myself. I played Lucy, and we knew that we wanted to have a theater of our own, and the people at Judson encouraged us to do so. So we didn't leave Judson, and as a matter of fact, after that, we performed many times at Judson, but we wanted to start a theater. So there was a woman whose name I don't remember, who was the head of a foundation whose name I don't remember, but a very important foundation, and I think it still exists today. And they had their hands on a building on Bank Street, part of Westbeth. It was one of the buildings of Westbeth. 2 stories, empty. Al Jolson had performed there many, many, many years ago. It had fallen on, emptiness. And there it was. And they said, okay, you want to have a theater and you have this amazing hit. We'll give you this building, but you got to make a theater out of it. That was the deal. So we talked to each other, and we said, we're gonna do it. And that's what we did. We took Dracula Sabbat and we performed it in that building. You know,
But then two of your original founders, two of the four, left after the
they
first
left
year.
because after a year, we had a 2-year agreement to be there for 2 years, rent-free. After a year, they tried to rent the building behind our backs and tell us to go. So George and I said, no, we're not going anywhere, we have a lease. But Theo and Larry said, we're artists. Artists don't get involved in anything. Of course, they were wrong, because artists get involved in everything. But that's what happened, so they quit because of that.
So you and George
So
were left
George
in
and I
charge. Yes.
slept at the theater because we were afraid they would try to remove us or lock the doors. We slept at the theater and we said, we're not going anywhere. And they acquiesced. They had to, because we had a lease. So for another year and a half, we did a ton of stuff, including Charles Ludlam and many, many wonderful performers, and plays and musicals. And we had 2 floors of theater, and at the end of 2 years, of course, we had to go. So we took the piano with us, because we got our piano. We moved it down the street. Ronald Tavel told me that there was this building on Jane Street that they had been using but weren't going to anymore, his theater. Why don't I try and get it? So I went to talk to them. Jane West was the name of the building. It was a home for homeless men over 45. And in those days, now we're talking 1972, homeless men over 45 died like flies. There were people dying on the back steps of that building all the time. There was vomit on the back. But they took us in at a very, very low rent. And we had a 5-year lease. We had our own entrance down the street, so nobody saw what was happening in the back. In the back was the library, what had been a library. It had been a Swedish officer's hotel. Beautiful building.
But when you got to it, it had fallen on very hard times.
When we got to it, it was disaster. So we, listen, you can, if you get 20 people together, it's amazing what they can do. You can refurbish a place. You can actually have a relationship to the actual building of the building if you get enough people at one time to work on something. So that's the sort of thing we did.
But your success at that theater really was instrumental in revitalizing the neighborhood.
Yes.
Now it's a very chic neighborhood and it's a very fancy hotel.
Yes. When we first moved in there, I said, hello out there, and there was no answer. On one side, there were warehouses totally empty, and on the other side, there was this building, and then nothing, and then there were the trucks. What the trucks were places where homosexuals could make love, okay, without being bothered. I mean, it was, to be a homosexual at that time was about the most terrible and terrifying thing for a person. I you look out your window. I once saw a guy in drag walking down the street, and a policeman was walking the other way, and the guy just walked backwards. Get the hell out of there. I mean, we were there during the whole thing with, what's the name of the club? Stonewall. I mean,
but Crystal, when you were devising your theater, did you have a program in mind? Did you have certain kinds of plays and writers that you were drawn to? Were you a certain kind of theater, or were you open to all kinds of plays and writers?
We were open to all kinds of new work. New work. My father was a poet. He was a published poet, as a matter of fact.
What was his
2
name?
books. What?
What was his name?
Frederick Field. That was his name. And he was published, and he was a very radical guy.
But is it fair to say that Theater for the New City, from the beginning, had a leftist orientation politically? Or is that a mischaracterization?
No, you could say that, but I mean, if you consider, I talk about homosexuality because that was the time when homosexuals finally began to have some political, clout. So if you are doing plays by openly gay writers on openly gay themes, are you left-wing?
You're making a political statement at that time.
Well, you want to call that left-wing? We were left-wing. If you want, we had plays by women writers. That's another thing. I mean, things that we take for granted now were fought for tooth and nail. Women's rights, I mean, if you want to call that left-wing, it's left-wing, depends what you mean by left-wing.
But was there an activist edge to
We
your work?
had an activist edge,
You
yes.
did. That's activist.
We were looking for plays that had a social meaning of some kind. Now, it didn't have to be any particular social meaning, but plays that had social significance, yes.
And revealed their times in some way.
That's right,
That's
very
that's
much
accurate.
so.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's accurate. Then, moving the story along, you moved to the Lower East Side after Jane West, and you've been there ever since, in
Yes.
2 places.
Jane, we started the Halloween parade. Ralph Lee worked as my chief designer for the street theater for 5 years, and came to me at the end of about 5 years and said, Crystal, I've got all these 6-foot, puppets in my apartment, and I have they're not doing anything. And why don't you have a parade of some kind? And I'll put my puppets in, and you can choose some other people to be in the parade, and I said, that's a wonderful idea. And I ran with it. And the first year, we had a brass band that started the parade, and we had all kinds of different groups in the parade, and we made our way through the West Village. That's what we did. We got all the local block association people to come out. That was how we had, some kind of overseeing safety, for the safety of the people in the parade. And we went from Jane Street down to West Beth, and then through all the streets in the West Village, and ended up in Washington Square Park. We had witches on the arch, and that's how. And its second year, it won an Obie, and it also made the front page of the New York Post. I mean, the front page of the paper, not the section, the paper. So then, then I got a call saying, we want to have a meeting, and we're going to run this by committee. It's getting too big. It's going to run by committee. So I said, well, you could run it by committee as long as I have artistic say. And they said, oh, no, you can't have artistic say because it's going to be run by committee. So I said, bye-bye. Because I had had experiences with losing artistic control over something, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So that's how we said goodbye to the parade, and then right at that time we moved anyway. We moved to 2nd Avenue because we lost our lease, because the whole neighborhood had changed. What had been empty warehouses were now apartments and, co-ops. I mean,
Chic boutique hotels and fancy coffee houses.
They got rid of the trucks. And they got rid of us.
But then you were a pioneer on the Lower East Side, because that
Well,
was
then
another
we-
sort of underserved community.
Yes, we found that there was a building on 2nd Avenue between 10th and 11th Street that I had performed in many years before. The Cricket and the Gate. The Gate was upstairs, the Cricket was downstairs. Two beautiful theaters, and I performed in the Cricket. So I knew the building, and they gave us 5 years at the rent of $1,250 a month. That's $1,250 a month for rent. They gave us a 5-year lease, and it was owned by a mafioso who was in jail at the time. And those two theaters had been a porno movie house and a key club where there was a murder. So they were and then the police closed it for a year. And that's when we came on the scene. So they were happy to give it to us cheap, but only for a certain amount of time. After 5 years, it went to $8,000 a month, which we could not afford.
And that's when you got into the building where you are to this day.
Right.
On 1st Avenue.
Yes.
It was a building built by Fiorello LaGuardia.
Yes, it
The
was.
1st Avenue retail market
Yes.
to get the peddlers off the street.
Yes, exactly, to give a home to the peddlers on the street.
So it's
Yes.
a wonderful place for your experimental
Yes.
downtown theater. And
Yeah.
there are still 4 theaters. Over the years, Crystal's Theater has produced over 800 new plays.
New work.
Over 800. No other theatrical organization has done as much. 800. And you're still there. Now, I want to ask you, and maybe people can already get the answer, but you've been in charge of a theater company for all these decades. What qualities are needed to be a good and long-lasting theater executive? What are Crystal's special qualities that would explain this long run?
Psoriasis. I had psoriasis. And you have to have a lot of patience with psoriasis, because you have to find out what is causing it. And you don't know. Anyway, it came finally into what I can eat and what I can't eat. So I don't do well with wheat, and I can have oats and all kinds of other things, but wheat I have to stay away from. It took years to find. Anyway, that's what you need to run a place. You have to have the patience of a saint. You have to deal with people you hate. but you have to deal with them. And you have to welcome them sometimes. And sometimes you start out hating them, and after a while you don't hate them anymore. And then after a while you begin to love them. It depends. You have to be open to new ideas and to new people and to new feelings, and that's really what you have to do. And you can't worry about how much sleep you get. I couldn't start a theater now. But this theater, what happens is after a number of years, it almost runs itself. Not really, but sort of. You know who's going to come up to you and tell you, they're quitting. You know who's going to be there even though they have some dread disease. They're going to come to work anyway. You already know, and you've read so many plays. You know how to. The head of La Mama, she used to be able to open the cover, smell the play, and she'd tell you if it was any good. Yeah, and she was usually right.
That's Ellen Stewart.
That was Ellen
Now, do you
Stewart.
do more than that when a new play is presented to
I do more
you?
than that, but let me tell you can size up someone in 5 minutes.
But can you size up a play quickly?
Well, no, you really have to read
You
it.
have to read it.
I admit it.
Yeah, you admit it.
But you can read the first 10 pages, and you can see if it's worth reading more.
But
You could do that.
But you are, after all these years, a very astute judge of a new play, I
Well, you
presume.
become good at it.
You become good at it.
I am.
You become good at it.
Like you are, you're famous.
No.
I never met you, but I know your name. I know your
Well, I'm a
name.
good writer, but I don't do what you do. That's a different
Well,
category altogether.
it's different, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, you
You
get
know.
good at what you do if you keep at it long enough.
If you keep at it, and you keep at it the right way, with an open heart and an open mind, you get good. You get good at it.
Now, have you acted in shows at the Theater for the New City?
I have.
A lot over the years?
Not a lot.
Not a
no.
lot.
As a matter of fact, I only perform in the street theater now, in the summertime, and I usually give myself a very small part. But yeah.
Tell us about that wonderful summer street theater
Yeah, well,
program. It's a musical.
We do a new musical every year, which I write. It's the only thing that I write. I write the book and the lyrics, and this year Peter DeZosa did the music. Wonderful. He's somewhere in the room.
Hi, I'm here. Thank you, Krista.
Okay. It's the audiences love it. We get big audiences. We go to all 5 boroughs in the city, and we perform in parks and playgrounds and closed off streets. And we get big audiences, and it's always very political, and it's very current, and audiences love it.
And you also are host to some theatrical organizations that don't have a theater of their own.
Yes.
The most famous is Bread and Puppet, probably the longest live experimental theater company in America. Is that true?
63 years.
63
Wow.
years of Bread and Puppet, and many of those years in performance at Theater for the New City every December.
I don't remember how many years, but quite some time.
Yes, one of the great theater companies. Now, I knew Peter Schumann, the head, and he's still the head, and he's still out there breaking his ass, for his company. But I knew him many years ago. We performed the street theater we were the first thing the public theater did. We were the first production. We did it outside in front of the public theater, but we were supported by the public theater. for one of our shows, and we were the first to. And he saw the show. He loved the theater, and so I got to know him many, many years ago. So, I mean, he's one of the great American artists, Peter Schumann, yeah.
And you're host to him every year still?
We hosted Bread and Puppet Theater, a very large company, yeah. Many young people in the company, all different ages, just like our street theater company is very diverse. We have young kids, 2 this year, who one was 60 and the other was 10. And then we have many 20s, 30s, 60s, 70s.
And do you still have your arts and education program?
Yes, we do.
Tell us about that.
Well, we have an arts and education program that's free to kids 8 to 10 from the area. It's a small program. There are only 25 kids, and we have 4 teachers, wonderful theater artists who perform during the year and direct shows during the year, and then do the after school. It's an after school program. It meets Monday and Wednesday from 3:30 to 5, and the teachers meet separately, to get ready and as a post.
So this is part of, would you even call it community outreach?
Yeah. it
Because
is.
you're very strong about
Yes.
community outreach and the civic purpose of theater.
Yes, we do. We believe that you really did your homework. It's wonderful. But you know a lot about. We feel that theater's a civic necessity. That's what we feel, and we go with that.
And you serve communities that often aren't exposed to lots of theater.
That's right. When a lot of places we go in the summer are what they call underserved neighborhoods, some of whom have a large amount of people who don't speak English. They speak very little English or none. And that's only some of the areas. And we go to areas where people don't have a chance to see live theater. It's amazing. They see TV, they have their phones,
But they don't know live theater.
No,
they don't know that experience.
No, and to them it's like an incredible eye opener, and like all of a sudden, it's like a starving person gets some real food. It's wonderful to see.
Now, one of your plays, A Buried Child, Sam Shepard, went on to the Theatre de Lis and then won a Pulitzer Prize. The first time ever an off-Broadway play won the Pulitzer. Did you know when that came to you that it was something you had to produce and you were lucky to get
Well, Buried Child, written by
Sam Shepard?
Sam. I knew Sam when I was an actor, and he was an actor, and we were never in the same show, but we'd be on the same bill. So we'd be together in the dressing room, and I got to know him, and so he did a show at the Public Theater where an actor, I believe, urinated as part of the show.
That was the Christmas stuff.
And he got terrible reviews, but actually it was a wonderful, what was the name of it?
I think it was the Curse of the Starving.
Yeah, Curse of the Starving
Starving
Class.
Child.
Class.
Yeah,
Class.
Curse of the Starving Class.
Yes.
It was a wonderful play, I saw it. But I caught him at a very good time. Namely, he just gotten lousy reviews for a show. So I wrote him a letter and I said, Sam, listen, why don't you give us your next play? you know, we wrote, and he wrote back, okay, sure, I got one.
And it was
And
Mary
it was
Child,
Mary Child, and that's how I got Mary Child.
which was a great,
Yeah.
it's a great play.
Yeah, and we did a
Great
wonderful
play.
production of it,
Wow.
and he came to the production, he loved it. And when and then they said, look, could you try to get a producer for this play because we'd like it to move? You see, in those days, there were Broadway producers. I don't think there are anymore.
They're committees.
They were, I don't know what they are. Yeah, committees. I don't know, but you can't do that anymore. But in those days, there were literally this person. And we invited them all to come and see it, you see? And one of them bit, you know? And they wanted me to, you know, let them have free rein. I had an agreement with Sam, and we said, no, you're gonna take everything the way it is. They wanted to change the designers. No, you want this play, you're gonna take it with the designers, all the actors. They even we had taken some lights from the lobby to use in the play. They took those too, and they took everything, even the stage managers. We said, you gotta, Ruth was, I don't remember her last name, but we said, you gotta take her too. And they did. And that was one of the reasons that it was such a successful production, because it wasn't watered down in any
It was
way.
authentic.
Yeah.
It was an authentic East Village production that moved to the West Village, but it felt so authentic. But I
Yeah.
saw it at the Theater Delise.
Yeah.
It was
At
very
the
powerful.
Delise.
Yes.
I saw it, yes.
Before we ask questions from the audience, and I want to ask Austin to chime in here, I do want to move away from Theater for the New City for a moment, because Crystal has an extraordinary credit that some of you may not know. She was a member of the original company of the Lincoln Center Theater under the direction of Harold Thorman, Elia Kazan, and Robert Whitehead. Not too shabby. And she appeared in After the Fall by Arthur Miller, in The Changeling, a Jacobean drama, the only classical theater piece directed by Kazan, didn't get good reviews, and Marco Millions, and then you did some choreography for The Changeling.
For the Changeling, I did. It started out wonderfully, but he cut it down.
Kazan,
Yeah. I did the whole piece at a rehearsal and got applause from the cast. But then, you know, he said, wow, it's too long. He told me to cut it. And I tried to cut it, but you know what? It didn't warrant cutting. So I said, I don't see any way to, he said, okay, well then I'll cut it. And he did. He cut it shorter, then he cut it shorter, then he cut it shorter. And then he never cut it out, but he cut it very short.
but you had worked with Kazan in Splendor in the Grass.
Yeah.
He was
well,
your director,
oh,
so you
Kazan.
knew him.
Kazan was a great director, but Jacobean drama was not for him. Okay. You know,
He tried.
yeah, he shouldn't have tried. He should have brought back some of the plays that he had directed before, you know, that had been so very popular, and he could have done that.
And
And-
Tennessee Williams played
Yes,
something
yes.
where he did understand the material.
Oh, he was a master,
Yes.
master. You know, you can't take a tap dancer and make a ballet dancer out of him. You can't do that unless you want to give him 4 years of ballet training. So, okay, so he could have slowly worked his way, you know,
But
but
Jacobean drama was too wide a reach at that time for him. And he gave up after that. I don't think he directed for the theater after that. What did you think of After the Fall?
Oh, I
Arthur
thought it
Miller?
was brilliant.
Me too.
I loved it, and Jason Robards. And eventually, I started out in that play playing a lady with a parrot. And they had wonderful stage managers. I mean, those stage managers were like mother and father to the cast. So they gave me a parrot, you know, and a couple of, in rehearsal, looking at the parrot, kissing the parrot, you know. And then they took the parrot away. And they said, no, you gotta do it to the air, you know, but we gave you the parrot so you know what it's like. So just, and that's what I ended up doing. So, but then the young woman, Zora Lampert, wonderful, brilliant actress.
Brilliant, yeah.
But couldn't, you know, we used to rehearse in the day and perform at night and rehearse the next day and perform at night. And she couldn't do all that. So she gave up her wonderful part in After the Fall because she had one of the leading roles in Marco Millions. And I took over that part. And that I had a wonderful time doing.
In After the Fall.
Yeah, in After the Fall. Yeah, and in order to do it, I had to go, because Ann told me you go to Jason's apartment in the Dakota and say hello to him, because he's got to okay you. So I did. I said hello, and we talked for a minute, and he told him she's fine, she'll be fine.
Now, was Kazan a good director of that material?
Brilliant,
Brilliant.
brilliant. A teacher, good teacher too. A wonderful, wonderful director. But I mean, first of all, that play, that Jacobean play, is a minor writer, you know? It wasn't Shakespeare. I think he would have done better if he'd picked a Shakespearean play. But he didn't want to, I guess, do one that everyone knew, you know, I don't know. But he picked a second-rate writer. It's a second-rate play. And he was a second-rate director.
And then Jose Quintero directed Marco Millions.
Yes, and Jose was another wonderful director. Wonderful, wonderful. A different kind of direction, but wonderful director.
And Zora Lampert stayed with that one.
And Zora Lampert stayed, and she did the lead in that play. Yeah.
Wonderful actress. She's still with us.
I haven't seen her in many years. I don't know. I really don't know.
She is.
Once I began Theater for the New City, I kind of lost everyone, because now I can go in at 2 in the afternoon and stay till 8 or 10 at night. But in those days, you know, you started at 9 in the morning and you finished at 9 in the morning the next day. I mean, you didn't sleep.
But you put in a 5-day week every week.
Put in a 7-day week.
As we
Oh,
speak.
now?
Now.
Now I do 7 days, 6 days, 7 days, 6 days.
You're there all the time.
Yeah. But not from morning to night. That's because I can't do it anymore. I can go from 2 in the afternoon till 8 or 10 at night. That's not a problem, you know. But I can't do what I used to do. And I don't have to. There are a lot of other people working at the theater, Emily Pizzella and Mark Marcotti, wonderful, brilliant, you know, he's, I don't know what position to say, and Alex Barteniev, and Brianna Barteniev, and Jonathan Weber, wonderful general manager, and I mean, there's people now, you know. In the old days, it was me and a bunch of eccentrics. Me and a bunch of eccentrics. I had someone working for me when we had the Jane West Hotel, and for some reason she climbed up and she fell through an awning that was up there. She didn't get hurt, but I don't know why she did that. You know, there were a lot of people like that.
And they gravitate to theater
They
for the news.
gravitated and did a lot of work, We had we had a magician come once who did, and he left his, he had a mouse in a hat, a real mouse, and he left his hat high up on something. And we had a cat, and the cat got up there and destroyed the mouse. You know, it was a crazy time.
But it's still a sort of freewheeling bohemian place, isn't it? Or
Up
not
to-
as much?
Let's put it this way, it looks like it. It looks like it. We encourage freedom of thought, but, you know, you give us too much trouble, we'll kick it out.
For Crystal, before we have to leave, yes?
Yeah, first of all, Crystal, I have to say how much I appreciate you and what you've done for the community, for the theater, for everything. I mean, absolutely. And second of all, simple question. How did you come up with the name Theater for the New City?
Yes, it's a great name. How did you come up with the name Theater for the New City? Wonderful name. Don't ever change it.
You know, I don't remember, really.
I think I remember.
I know we had an argument about it.
My research.
Oh, I
tells me,
know.
yes, you know.
Larry wanted to call it New City Theater. And so we had a discussion, and one of us, I don't think it was me, said, well, we want to call it Theater for the New City. We were, you know who was running for mayor? Lindsay. Lindsay was one of the best mayors we ever had, but he had a lot of trouble because he wasn't politically savvy enough to know how to handle, you know, and he had trouble with some of the elements of the city. He could, you know, but he was a wonderful mayor.
But I think he used the phrase New City.
He might have.
And I think that was
Because
the
it was,
inspiration.
I remember that we were inspired by him. That I remember. So maybe it was. I remember that he's very connected to our name.
He was a great mayor.
Yeah.
We were gonna have a new city, you know?
He said that. He
Yeah.
said that, and then you took the name for your wonderful theater. Another question? Okay, I think we want to acknowledge how special it has been to talk to Crystal.